Welcome to the Astronomers for Planet Earth webinar series, hosted by Dr. Travis Rector, Professor of Astrophysics at University of Alaska, Anchorage. Today's guest is Dr. Francesca Fragkoudi, a postdoctoral fellow at the European Southern Observatory in Germany, where she researches how galaxies like our own Milky Way form and evolve throughout cosmic history. She believes that science and its communication play a fundamental role in achieving a fairer and more sustainable society for all. To this aim, she founded the Columba-Hypatia Astronomy for Peace project, which uses astronomy as a tool for peace and diplomacy on the post-conflict island of Cyprus.
Hi, everyone. My name is Travis Rector, and I'm a professor of physics and astronomy at the University of Alaska, Anchorage. I'm also one of the organizers of a group called Astronomers for Planet Earth, which is a group of astronomy professionals, educators, and students who are working to help find solutions for climate change. Our speaker today is Francesca Fragkoudi, who is at the European Southern Observatory, and she's going to be talking with us today about a project she's working on called Astronomy for Peace, the Columba-Hypatia project. And I think it's going to be a really interesting illustration for us about how astronomers can work to helping build bridges and communities to address climate change. Francesca, thank you for joining us today and welcome.
Thanks, Travis. And thanks very much for the invite to give this talk, which is, probably on a topic that's not as closely related to climate change as a lot of the other really fantastic talks that you've had in this webinar series. But I hope it can serve as a kind of interesting example of how we can use astronomy as a tool to kind of mitigate or tackle social problems. And in this context, it's how we use astronomy as a tool for peace and diplomacy in post-conflict regions. So to give you a bit of background and context for how the project started. So the project takes place on the island of Cyprus, which is a little island in the Eastern Mediterranean that you can see here, which is where I'm from. And I don't want to get into too much detail about the history and the politics, but basically what you need to know is that the two main ethnic communities in Cyprus, the Greek Cypriots and the Turkish Cypriots, have been living separated for over 45 years in a post-conflict state. And the communities are separated by what's known as the Green Line, which is basically this line that runs through the island that separates the southwest from the northeast. And you have the United Nations in between. So there's one of the United Nations peacekeeping forces along this Green Line. And this is one of the longest UN peacekeeping forces in the world after the missions in the Middle East and in Kashmir. So I'm from Nicosia, which is the capital of Cyprus, and Nicosia is known as the last divided European capital. So there's actually the division, or let's say, it's not really a wall, it's more like barbed wire, but it runs through the middle of the city. And in 2003, the checkpoints were actually opened in Nicosia and other locations in the island, which allowed people from the two sides to actually cross, to start crossing into the other side. And this was the first time this was happening in over 30 years. So it was actually not possible to cross for over 30 years from one side to the other. So since 2003, there's been a lot more kind of efforts to, let's say, create some kind of cooperation and collaboration between the two sides. And there's been more peace building efforts. Now, so for me, I left Cyprus in 2006. So when I was 18, I left to go study. And after some time, after I finished my PhD, I actually went to Peru for a month as part of a really fantastic project by Galileo Mobile, which is called Constellation. And we did astronomy outreach activities with communities in rural areas in the Andes around Cusco. And at that time, I really witnessed kind of firsthand how powerful astronomy is in bringing people from different cultures together. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be really great to use astronomy also as a tool to bring people from the two sides of Cyprus together and to kind of try and get them to talk to each other and break down all these stereotypes and barriers that exist. So that's how the Columba-Hypatia project came about. So the project is basically a grassroots initiative that uses astronomy as a tool to inspire children and also adults to be curious about science and the cosmos, but it also encourages a sense of global citizenship and a culture of peace and nonviolence. Just some context on the name. So Columba gets its name from the dove constellation, which is a symbol, of course, of peace. And Hypatia is for Hypatia of Alexandria, who was, of course, one of the first female astronomers in historical record. And it's there to celebrate women in STEM and also to highlight the role that women can play as leaders in the peace building process, which is another place where we need more women to kind of take on leadership roles. So the project began in 2016 with zero budget, but we soon afterwards actually got funding from the International Astronomical Union's Office of Astronomy for Development and funding from other philanthropic organizations in Cyprus. The United Nations Peacekeeping Force in Cyprus also helped us with some funding, MEAD instruments, and also the institutes that I've been working at. So MPA and also ESO provided some donations to the project. So the project basically tries to play a kind of fall within the framework of some of the sustainable development goals outlined by the UN. In particular, we focus a lot on goal 16, of course, which is on peace, justice, and strong institutions, as well as goals 4 and 5, and touch upon goal 13 also. So we bring together communities separated by conflict, engaging children with educational activities. We encourage girls to pursue a career in STEM by providing female role models. And of course, we try and inspire a sense of unity and global citizenship. And I just want to say these Sustainable Development Goals are, of course, a kind of a blueprint by the UN in order to try and achieve a better and fairer future. So I'm sure that for astronomers for planet Earth, the connection between astronomy and peace is quite obvious, but this was a question that we got asked a lot when we started the project. So what's the link between astronomy and peace? What do they have to do with each other? So I'd like to spend a couple of minutes to just highlight the connection between astronomy and peace. So of course, learning about astronomy helps us understand our place in the universe. It provides us with a kind of unifying cosmovision and a sense of global citizenship. And this has been often reported as being similar to this overview effect, which is reported by astronauts, in which one feels this feeling of connectedness, that Earth and all the living beings on it are part of one ecosystem. And of course, there's the context that national boundaries are just not visible from space. When we view Earth from this vantage point, the conflicts that divide people just obviously seem less important. And astronomy has been affecting our cosmovision and our culture throughout human history, and we can go back thousands of years to get examples, but we can also look to a few hundred years ago, where astronomy completely changed how we view our place in the universe, in terms of realizing that we're not the center. Earth is not the center of the universe. Actually, planet Earth is just one of many planets, and our sun is just one of many stars in the galaxy. And of course, our galaxy is just one of the many galaxies in the universe. So it's a very, of course, humbling experience to understand this and to think about this. But on the other hand, of course, life on Earth is precious and rare. Earth is the only planet we know to host life, and we haven't yet been able to find biosignatures on other planets. And this really highlights the fragility of Earth's biosphere and how we need to work together and cooperate to promote kind of sustainability and preserve the fragile ecosystem on Earth. And also something that I think is really important is that astronomy is a really exciting and captivating subject. And I'm going to come back to that in a bit, but this fascination with the sky is something that's shared across all cultures and throughout human history. And that's really important, especially in post-conflict regions. And I'll talk a bit more about why I think this has been a really key component to making this project successful. And I think you can see here just by looking at these. So these are photographs from some of our previous projects with Galileo Mobile, and you can see just how excited and fascinated all these kids are. And I could ramble on for a long time about why I think astronomy and peace are a good match. But of course, Carl Sagan said it best and most concisely in these 3 sentences when he was reflecting on this picture of planet Earth taken from the outskirts of the solar system, when he said that it has been said that astronomy is a humbling and character-building experience, that there is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than this distant image of our tiny world, and that to him it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known. So I think that perfectly kind of sums up the relation between astronomy and promoting peace. So going back to our project, we have 2 implementing organizations, and we really adopted a kind of multidisciplinary approach in this project. So on the one hand, we have one of the implementing organizations is Galileo Mobile, which is a nonprofit itinerant science education initiative that's run by astronomers, educators, and science communicators that brings modern astronomy closer to young people around the world. And we really put an emphasis on reaching out to remote or underserved regions that have little or no access to other outreach actions. And our motto is under the same sky. So we really try and promote this cultural exchange in all of our projects. And on the other hand, the other project partner in the project is the Association for Historical Dialogue and Research, which is an intercommunal organization specializing on peace education based in Cyprus. So this is an NGO based in Cyprus. And a lot of our work is done at the Home for Cooperation, which is a unique community center that's based inside the United Nations controlled buffer zone. And I'll say a couple more words about that in a bit. Okay, so the project has 3 main target groups. The main target group of the project is primary school children. And we carry out activities in primary schools around the island and in bicommunal activities in the buffer zone. And I'll come back to the activities in the next slide. And we also, the next target group is adults and the general public. So we've carried out astronomy events such as lectures and star parties, mostly in the UN buffer zone so that people from both sides of the island can come and participate in these events. And this is a really great way to get people to kind of come along, because often people are not as interested in participating in these kinds of, let's say, peace building activities, but they do come because they're really interested in the astronomy part. And we've also carried out youth events around astronomy themes. So lectures, star parties, educational hands-on activity, and also astronomy camps. And the astronomy camps were particularly promoted and led by one of our team members, who you can see here, Natalie Christopher, who very tragically passed away in 2019. So we always think of her fondly when thinking about the project. Okay, so what kind of activities do we do? So specifically focusing on the activities for children. So on the one hand, we have these so-called monocommunal activities. So these are basically days where we go into schools around the island, either in Greek Cypriot schools or Turkish Cypriot schools. And there we carry out inquiry-based educational astronomy activities. And it's the kind of, we kind of do the standard astronomy outreach activities of talking about planets, the sun, galaxies, learning about our place in the cosmos, and all of this from the lens of modern astronomy. We also had some solar telescopes donated to the project by Mead. We also have carry out solar observations. And the other thing that we do during these monocommunal days is that we also prepare the children for the bicommunal activities. So keep in mind that for these children, they've probably never met anyone from the other community. The idea of going into the buffer zone, which is where we take the kids for the bicommunal activities, is quite scary for a lot of them. It's a part of the island that they've been kind of taught to be afraid of. It's a militarized zone. They don't know what to expect. So there's a lot of chatting and also kind of letting the children express any fears or anxieties that they might have about going into the buffer zone. And then we have the bicommunal astronomy days. And this is where we go into the United Nations buffer zone at the Home for Cooperation. And we carry out these kinds of fun astronomy activities. We also first, usually what we do is we do some icebreaker activities. So this is what you can see in the two bottom left photos. So on the left, we're standing in a big circle, everyone's holding hands. And we usually play some kind of icebreaker games just to release some of the tension that the kids are usually feeling. When they arrive, they're always very apprehensive of meeting kids from the other community. And we also play this fun game, which you can see on the photo next to it, where you have to introduce yourself, but in the language you don't speak. So if you're Greek Cypriot, and obviously you speak Greek, you have to introduce yourself in Turkish. So you have to say Beni Madim and say your name. And if you're Turkish Cypriot, then you have to introduce yourself in Greek, say Melene and say your name. And this is a kind of fun way of getting to know each other. And then we carry out astronomy activities that are basically adapted to promote interaction between the children, and so that they can learn about each other and hopefully try and break down some of the preconceived stereotypes that they have. And our favorite is doing the Cyprus Golden Record activity. So this is basically based on the Voyager record, on the Golden Record on the Voyager space probes. And what we do is we say, okay, we're going to build a Cyprus Golden Record that needs to be representative of all of Cyprus. We break the kids into small teams, and each team has a number of translators to help the kids communicate with each other. And then they kind of build their golden record, which you can see on the bottom right here. And I actually have a clip from these activities, so I'm going to play that now.
Okay, so what I want us to do today is to make our own golden record from Cyprus, okay? What we would want to send to an alien civilization that would be representative of all of Cyprus, okay?
This is a very nice activity. It's based on the golden record that's on the Voyager spacecrafts, which were launched in the 70s. Well, it was more symbolic than anything, but the idea was if these spacecrafts were to ever be intercepted by an alien civilization, for us to give kind of a token of Earth.
So, for example, images of people, images of natural landscapes, animals, sounds of Cyprus, which could include nature, sounds of nature, sounds of animals, music, different musics from the island, our languages, different languages that are spoken on our island, food of Cyprus. And I want to know if you have any other ideas of topics that you think would be important.
And this is really great because it gives the children an opportunity to discuss about different things they want to send that is representative of all of Cyprus, that are actually similar between the different communities in Cyprus, but also the differences, which are very interesting. And so, yeah, so the idea is to build a golden record from Cyprus as a representation of our country, of our common land.
What's your favorite food? Sarma. Sarma. Kupepia.
What music do you like of Cyprus? We will find sounds, but also music.
5, 6, 7, like this.
Yeah, so that's the an example of some of the activities that we do, and you can see it's a very joyous kind of environment and feeling going on there, which is really nice to be a part of. So in terms of the impact of the project, we've reached out to more than 700 children, youth, teachers, and members of the general public. Our documentary has more than 7,000 views on the various platforms. And the project was awarded the Science Engagement of the Year Award in 2018 by Falling Walls, the Falling Walls Foundation and Robert Bosch Stiftung. And it's been highlighted as a best practices project on using astronomy for peace and diplomacy at the IAU 100 flagship event in Brussels. And it's also been part of inspiring the OAD flagship theme of using astronomy for diplomacy. But of course, when we talk about impact, there's one thing that we can't really measure, and that's these kinds of moments. So here what you see, this is a photo that was taken from one of the volunteers was in tears when this happened. So this is a photo of a little Greek Cypriot girl and Turkish Cypriot girl that became friends during one of these bicommunal meetups. And, you know, this is not an isolated incident. This happened quite often where the kids, you know, became friends and totally changed their view of how they, you know, saw the other side. And, you know, from being very scared and afraid of even meeting them to, you know, becoming really good friends and exchanging bracelets and all that kind of stuff. So this is one of the really beautiful outcomes of the project. In terms of some reflections and lessons learned throughout the project. So of course we thought that astronomy could be used for peace and diplomacy. But I think after having carried out the project, we were more convinced of this than ever. So I think really science and astronomy are actually very powerful tools for diplomacy, from grassroots initiatives like ours, but also, of course, you know, on larger scales in intergovernmental endeavors such as CERN or ESO. I mean, science is really a powerful way of bringing people and also nations together to cooperate and collaborate. In terms of projects like our own, I think it's really important that it's an engaging subject which really captivates children, but also educators, and really grabs their attention and commits them to the project. So as I was saying, I think this is really important in a post-conflict context, because for people who have worked in post-conflict contexts, I'm sure they've experienced that it can be quite difficult to get people to engage in these types of like peace building activities or peace building projects, because people can have a bit of fatigue in terms of you know, wanting to engage in this, but also people are often quite hesitant, or you know, are just, you know, maybe not fully embracing that kind of mind frame, or like wanting to engage in these kinds of peace building activities. And so having something like astronomy to be the main part of that project, that was really helpful. So for example, parents of the children had to sign a permission slip that allowed them to come to the buffer zone. And some of the parents didn't sign the permission slip, so the kids wouldn't be able to come to the buffer zone. But then we would do the monocommunal days, where we would actually go to the school and talk to the kids about astronomy, and they would look through the telescope, and they would have such a fun time that they would go home and, you know, really, you know, beg their parents to sign the permission slip because they really wanted to participate in the project. And this happened a number of times where we actually then, you know, got kids that were able to then come because they really loved the project so much. And also, you know, there were teachers that sometimes might have been a bit hesitant, but were very, might have been hesitant with the peace building part, but were very interested in getting the children in their class to have more contact with STEM subjects. So, you know, wanted to engage in the project. And of course, you know, astronomy provides this natural message of unity, and has been, you know, suggested to increase receptiveness, empathy, and global perspective. You know, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence, and this has been termed the pale blue dot effect. And there's also actually some research being done to actually see if you know, by teaching kids astronomy, it does actually increase their receptiveness, empathy, and in-group inclusion. So I think that will be interesting to see the kind of formal research coming out of that. But, you know, there is a lot of anecdotal evidence in this direction. And the children themselves kind of reported to us changing views about the other kids, about the other group. And here I have another short clip where the kids themselves talk about this experience. So I'll play that now.
Birbirimizin hakkında bilmediğimiz çok şey var. Onun için her şeye kendi bakış açımızla bakmamamız gerekiyor.
Eşit olmamız lazım yani.
Μάτια, μύτης, είναι σαν εμάς, σαν να έχουμε το ίδιο αίμα, σαν αδέλφια.
Εγώ χωθήκα λίγο κάπως.
Onları gördüğüm zaman kendimi dışlanmış hissettim. Ama birlikte tanıştığımızda daha iyi oldu.
Ναι, στην αρχή δεν μου άρεσε και τόσο πολύ, επειδή δεν καταλάβαινα τη γλώσσα τους, αλλά μετά καταλαβαίνα τι έλεγαν λίγο. μιλούσαμε αγγλικά.
When you start to look at their point of view, you can understand them. And understanding a person or people will increase your empathy.
İlk gördüğüm zaman onlar hakkında pek iyi şeyler düşünmedim. Şimdi onlar hakkında daha iyi ve insan gibi düşünüyorum.
Γίναμε φίλοι, κάναμε αστεία, κάναμε λίγες χαζομαρές.
Εγώ εύχομαι όλοι να χορεύουν, να διασκεδάζουν και να μην τους λυπεί και να μην βρίζονται, να μην τσακώνονται.
Ben açıkçası memnunum. Hiçbir sorunumuz yok bence. Tabii barış dışında.
We should understand that peace is a process, so change is not going to happen from one day to the other. Kids and educators were interested in each other. We're interested in learning about each other, and that's the first step of this process. That would eventually pave the way for more interaction and for the deconstruction of these barriers, both in people's minds and hearts.
The other thing that I think is really important in terms of some reflections and lessons learned is really the importance of multidisciplinarity and also taking into account the local context. So in terms of the multidisciplinarity aspect, we had in the project the involvement of individuals from a lot of different backgrounds. And I think that was really key to its success. So for example, we had, from Galileo Mobile, we had astronomers, science communicators, but also from the HDR, the NGO that we collaborate with, we got to work with educators, peace education practitioners, experts working on conflict resolution. So, we had a really interesting mix of backgrounds and different people. And, at times it was actually quite challenging to get on the same page because we were just used to doing things in a very different way. Like the way we were used to doing astronomy outreach is very different to how an NGO that specializes on conflict resolution and peace education works. But I think in the end, the outcome was that it was a much fuller and richer project. So I think that was really important. And also, of course, the involvement of local stakeholders and kind of taking into account the local context was very important. So, we were all very much aware of the local context. We had, the people from Galileo Mobile that were involved were kind of informed about the local context by the locals. But we also had a lot of stakeholders from within the local context that participated. So like teachers and teacher unions, different NGOs, but also the science community and also the amateur astronomy community of the island got involved in the project. So a lot of these people got to take ownership of the project and kind of feel involved. And, people who might have otherwise not also participated again in this, in these kinds of peace building activities did do that because of the astronomy aspect of it. So what lies ahead for the project? So as almost everyone and everything in the world, COVID-19 has significantly impacted us. So the checkpoints, the crossing between the checkpoints has actually been severely restricted and at points even banned in the past year. This is the first time that this has happened since 2003, that we can't cross. So, I'm hoping that there will be more of cooperation on COVID-19 so that we can actually start crossing and start doing the project again. And, we really want to, because we want to, of course, continue our activities with the children and the public. And I think these need to be done in person, given the nature of the project. And we also participated in what's called the International Institute for Peace Education Conference in 2019. And we started building up a network of partnerships and collaborations on a kind of global level and discussing with different people and different organizations about, let's say, using this astronomy for peace concept also in other post-conflict regions. So we'll hope that that will pick up again once, travel is possible and we can actually think about the future again. And we have a new project also coming up that has also been completely put on hold that involves leadership and kind of camps and summer camps for teens within this context. So yeah, thank you very much for listening. And of course, if you want to learn more about the project, I leave some resources here for you to check up with us. Thank you.
Wow, Francesca, that was really interesting. And just listening to your talk, I was starting to think of all sorts of ideas and ways we could maybe use some of the tools that you've developed and things that you've talked about in helping us address climate change. So I know that in our Q&A session, we'll have a really good conversation about that very topic. And so for those of you who have watched the talk, I encourage you to come to the Q&A or go listen to the recording, and we'll talk there more about how we can use these lessons to talk more about climate change. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
We hope you've enjoyed today's talk. Each of our talks is followed with a Q&A session that you can learn more about in the video description. If you're interested in Astronomers for Planet Earth, you can learn more at our website, astronomersforplanet.earth, and on social media as well. If you would like to be notified about future talks and events, please follow and join us.